My name is Robert Caldwell, and for the past 19 years, I've worked as a maintenance technician for the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority. Specifically, I'm assigned to the tunnels beneath Boston, the miles of subway passages that carry thousands of commuters every day through routes that, in some cases, haven't changed since the system opened in 1897. It's not glamorous work. We repair tracks, clear debris, fix lighting, check structural integrity. Most days, I don't see the sun. I enter through a service entrance at 6 in the morning and emerge 12 hours later, my coveralls stained with grease and tunnel dust. People ask me if it's creepy working underground all day. The truth is, you get used to it. The constant hum of distant trains becomes white noise. The darkness beyond your work lights becomes normal. Even the rats stop bothering you after the first few months. It's just a job, same as any other. Or at least that's what I used to think. Christmas Eve 2019, I drew the short straw for holiday maintenance. The MBTA doesn't shut down for Christmas, which means someone has to be on call to handle emergencies. My partner for the night was a guy named Carl Hibbard, a 20-year veteran who'd seen everything the tunnels could throw at him. We met at the service entrance on Boylston Street at 9 p.m. Both of us resigned to spending our holiday underground while everyone else was home with their families. The assignment was routine: inspect and clear a section of abandoned tunnel near Park Street Station. This particular stretch had been sealed off in the 1960s when they reconfigured the Green Line. It ran for about 800 feet parallel to the active tunnel, separated by a concrete wall. Officially, it was empty, just a dead space. But every few years, we'd get reports of debris buildup or water seepage, and someone would have to go in and check it out. Carl and I geared up in the equipment room, hard hats with mounted LED lamps, reflective vests, tool belts, radios, and respirators in case we ran into bad air. Carl, who had a thick Boston accent and a perpetually tired expression, handed me a thermos of coffee he'd brought. "Merry Christmas, Bobby," he said with zero enthusiasm. "You too. How long you figure this'll take?" 2-3 hours if we don't hit any problems. Could be worse. Could be raw sewage backup on the Red Line. Did that last Easter. Still have nightmares. We accessed the abandoned tunnel through a locked service door at track level. The door was marked with warnings about unauthorized access and structural hazards. Carl had the key, a heavy brass thing that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Eisenhower administration. The lock fought him for a minute before finally turning with a deep clunk. The door swung inward, releasing a breath of cold air that smelled of concrete dust and stagnant water. Our headlamps cut through the darkness, revealing a tunnel that looked frozen in time. The rails were still in place, rusted to the point of brittleness. The walls were covered in decades of grime and graffiti from maintenance workers who'd come before us. Stalactites of mineral deposit hung from the ceiling where water had been seeping through for years. "Home sweet home," Carl muttered, stepping across the threshold. We walked the tunnel slowly, our lights scanning the walls and ceiling for signs of structural problems. The first 100 yards were uneventful. Some water pooling, nothing serious. A few places where the old electrical conduits had pulled away from the wall. Carl made notes on a clipboard while I took photos with a department-issued camera. Around 200 yards in, we found the first oddity. It was a pile of debris against the right-hand wall. That itself wasn't unusual. Abandoned tunnels collected all kinds of junk over the years. What was unusual was that the debris was arranged, not randomly dumped, but deliberately stacked. Pieces of wood, broken concrete, sections of old signage, all fitted together into something that looked almost like furniture. Like someone had tried to make a table or a bench. Carl crouched down and examined it with his flashlight. "Homeless, maybe," he suggested. "Sometimes they find ways into the old tunnels. We sealed this section, but seals can fail." "Out here?" I asked. This is pretty far from any access point. And look at this stuff. Some of it's been here for decades. You can see the rust patterns. Carl grunted. He was right that homeless encampments showed up in the tunnels sometimes, but usually near active stations where there was warmth and occasional foot traffic. This was just a dead end in the dark. It didn't make sense. We continued deeper. At 300 yards, we found more arrangements, more piles of debris, each one structured with clear intentionality. One looked like it might have been a shelf. Another was unmistakably a chair, constructed from a milk crate and boards. And then we found the candles. They were arranged in a circle on the ground, maybe 20 of them, all different sizes and colors. They'd been burned down to various lengths, wax pooled and hardened on the tunnel floor. In the center of the circle was a small pile of objects. I stepped closer and identified them. Coins, buttons, a tarnished watch, a pair of eyeglasses with cracked lenses. "What the hell is this?" I said. Carl's expression had shifted from tired annoyance to something more wary. "I don't know, some kind of ritual thing. Kids playing around." Kids wouldn't make it this far. And how would they even know this tunnel was here? Carl didn't have an answer. We stood there for a moment, our headlamps illuminating the circle. Something about it felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just wrong. Like we were looking at something private, something we weren't meant to see. Carl keyed his radio. "Base, this is Hibbard. You copy?" Static hissed back at us. He tried again. "Base, this is Maintenance Team 7. Radio check." More static. He frowned and checked the radio's battery indicator. Full charge. "Must be the depth," he said. "Or the concrete. These things are supposed to work anywhere in the system, but..." He shrugged. We pressed on. The tunnel began to curve slightly to the left, following the contour of the street above. The temperature dropped as we went deeper. I could see my breath now, even though we were insulated from the outside weather. That was strange. Underground temperature was usually constant, hovering around 55 degrees year-round. At 400 yards, we heard the first sound. It was faint, barely audible over the ambient hum of the city above and the distant rumble of trains on the active line. But it was distinct, a voice, or multiple voices. It was hard to tell. Carl and I stopped walking. We stood in silence, listening. The sound came again. It was definitely voices, and they were singing. "You hear that?" I asked quietly. "Yeah," Carl said. "I hear it." We stood there for a full minute, trying to pinpoint the direction. The acoustics in the tunnel were strange, bouncing sound in unpredictable ways. But gradually, I became certain the singing was coming from deeper in, from the direction we were headed. "Could be someone accessing from the other end," Carl suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. "The other end is sealed, has been for 50 years. Seals fail. You said it yourself." "The singing, though. Who would be down here singing?" Carl didn't answer. Instead, he started walking again, his hand resting on the radio at his belt, even though we both knew it wasn't working. I followed, every sense heightened now, my headlamp beam cutting back and forth across the tunnel walls. The singing grew clearer as we advanced. It was a hymn. I recognized it from childhood church services. Silent Night, but the melody was off somehow. The timing was wrong, the notes stretched and distorted, and the voices themselves sounded strange. Too many of them, all singing in perfect unison, which shouldn't have been possible. At 500 yards, we found the source. There was an alcove in the left wall, maybe 8 feet deep and 6 feet wide. It had probably been a maintenance access or equipment storage space originally. Now it contained a group of people. I counted 7 figures. They stood facing the back wall of the alcove, their backs to us. They were dressed in clothes that looked decades out of date. Heavy wool coats, fedoras, dresses with hemlines from the 1940s. They swayed gently as they sang, their movements synchronized. Carl and I froze. Neither of us knew what to do. The people weren't doing anything threatening. They were just singing. But something about the scene set off every alarm bell in my nervous system. Carl cleared his throat loudly. "Excuse me, this is a restricted area. You folks need to come with us." The singing stopped. The figures didn't turn around. They just stood there, silent and still. "MBTA maintenance," Carl continued, his voice firmer now. "This tunnel is off limits to the public. I need you to identify yourselves and explain how you got in here." No response. The figures remained motionless. I stepped forward, trying to get a better angle to see their faces. "Hello, can you hear us?" One of the figures turned its head slightly, not toward us, but toward the wall, like it was listening to something we couldn't hear. Then it resumed singing. The others joined in. Same hymn, same distorted melody. Silent Night, rendered in voices that sounded human but wrong, like an audio recording played at the wrong speed. "All right, that's enough," Carl said. He started toward the alcove. I grabbed his arm. "Wait, something's not right." "No shit, something's not right. We've got trespassers in a sealed tunnel singing Christmas carols. But they're still trespassers, and we need to get them out." He shook off my hand and approached the group. I followed reluctantly, my hand on the radio, even though I knew it was useless. Carl reached out and touched the shoulder of the nearest figure, an older man in a gray overcoat. The figure turned. I saw its face and felt my stomach drop. It was a man, or it had been once. But the face was wrong. The features were there, but they were distorted, stretched, like someone had pulled the skin too tight over the skull. The eyes were sunken so deep they were just shadows. The mouth was open in song, but the lips didn't move properly. They stayed frozen in a rictus grin while sound somehow emerged. Carl jerked his hand back. Jesus Christ. The other figures turned now, all of them, moving in that same synchronized way. All of them with those same stretched faces, those same shadow eyes, those same frozen grins. They continued singing. The words were clear now, but they still sounded wrong, like the voices were coming from somewhere behind or beneath the figures, using them as speakers. "Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright." Carl backed away. "Bobby, we need to go. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. We turned and started back the way we'd come, walking fast. Behind us, the singing followed. It didn't get quieter as we put distance between ourselves and the alcove. Instead, it seemed to spread, echoing off the tunnel walls, coming from all directions at once. "Round yon virgin mother and child, holy infant so tender and mild." We broke into a run. Our footsteps slapped against the concrete. Our breathing was ragged. The tunnel stretched ahead of us, longer than I remembered. Had it been this far to the entrance? 500 yards should have taken just a few minutes, but we'd been running for what felt like 10, and we still hadn't reached the service door. "Sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace." Carl's radio crackled to life suddenly, making both of us jump. A voice came through, distorted by static. "Meta Team 7. Your position." Carl grabbed the radio. "Base, this is Hibbard. We are in the abandoned tunnel section, Park Street West. We need immediate assistance. There are..." The radio cut to static again, then went dead. We kept running. The tunnel seemed to be stretching, the walls pressing in. My headlamp flickered, dimmed, then brightened again. Carl's did the same. The LED lights weren't supposed to flicker. They were solid state, reliable. The singing was getting louder, and now I could hear footsteps behind us. Slow, measured footsteps. The sound of 7 pairs of feet moving in perfect unison. Silent night, holy night, shepherds quake at the sight. I risked a glance over my shoulder. My headlamp beam swept back down the tunnel. The 7 figures were walking toward us. They moved in a line, shoulder to shoulder, filling the width of the tunnel. They were still facing forward, still singing, but they were getting closer. and they were moving faster than we were running. "Carl," I gasped. "They're gaining." "I see them. Just keep going." The tunnel curved ahead. I remembered this curve. We were close to the entrance. We had to be. But the darkness seemed absolute, swallowing our lights. I couldn't see the door, couldn't see any sign of the way out. The footsteps behind us stopped. The singing stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the sound had been. Carl and I slowed, then stopped, turning to look back. Our headlamps illuminated the empty tunnel behind us. No figures, no movement, just the vacant space and the rusted rails and the graffitied walls. "Where did they go?" I whispered. Carl shook his head slowly. His face was pale, slicked with sweat despite the cold. "I don't know. The singing started again, but this time it was coming from ahead of us. We spun around. The 7 figures were standing between us and the service door. They blocked the tunnel completely, that line of outdated clothes and distorted faces. The door was visible behind them, maybe 30 yards away. Our only exit. They stood motionless, waiting. "Silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light." Carl's hand went to his tool belt. He pulled out a heavy flashlight, the kind with a metal body that could double as a weapon. "We're going through them," he said. "Stay close to me." "Carl, we don't know what they are." "I don't care. That door is the only way out. We're going through." He started forward. I followed, because the alternative was staying alone in the dark with those things somewhere behind us. As we approached, the figures didn't move. They just stood there, singing, their voices overlapping in that impossible harmony. Up close, I could see more details that made my skin crawl. Their clothes weren't just old-fashioned. They were rotted in places. Showing skin beneath that looked gray and bloodless. Their hands hung at their sides, fingers too long, joints bent at wrong angles. Carl raised the whole flashlight like a club and charged the line. He hit the nearest figure, an older woman in a tattered dress, and passed straight through her. Not knocking her aside, through her, like she was made of smoke. He stumbled, off balance, and turned back. The figures were still standing in their line, undisturbed. Carl had passed through them without leaving a mark. "What the hell?" he breathed. I reached out slowly and touched the closest figure, the man in the gray overcoat that Carl had touched before. My hand went into him, through the fabric of his coat, through what should have been his torso, encountering no resistance. It was like touching cold air. The figure turned its head toward me. Those sunken shadow eyes focused on my face. The mouth grinned wider. "Radiant beams from thy holy face, with the dawn of redeeming grace." I jerked my hand back. The figure returned its attention to the front, resuming its swaying motion. Carl grabbed my arm. "Come on, if they're not solid, we can just walk through." We moved forward into the line of figures. It felt like walking through a freezer, each body radiating cold that bit through our clothes and into our bones. The singing continued all around us, inside our heads now, resonating in our skulls. "Jesus, Lord, at thy birth. Jesus, Lord, at thy birth." We emerged on the other side of the line and ran for the door. Carl hit it full speed, grabbing the handle and twisting. The door didn't move. He pulled harder, his face reddening with effort. "It's locked," he said. "From the outside. How is it locked from the outside?" "You have the key. Use it." "It's a deadbolt. It doesn't have a keyhole on this side. Bobby, we locked ourselves in." I felt ice water replace the blood in my veins. "That's not possible. There has to be a way to open it from inside. Fire code." This tunnel was sealed in 1968, before modern fire codes. "Bobby, there's no emergency release. We're locked in." Behind us, the singing changed. The figures were singing something different now. Not Silent Night anymore. Something else. Something I didn't recognize. The words were in a language I'd never heard. Harsh and guttural and wrong. We both turned. The 7 figures were facing us now. All of them. Those shadow eyes fixed on us with clear intention. They began to move forward. "Radio," I said. "Try the radio again." Carl fumbled with the radio, hands shaking. "Base, this is Hibbard. Emergency situation. We are trapped in the sealed tunnel section and require immediate assistance. Do you copy? Base, do you copy?" Static. Then faintly, a voice. "Copy. Sending help. 20 minutes. "We don't have 20 minutes, Carl said. The figures were 10 yards away now. 5 yards. Close enough that I could see the details I wished I couldn't see. The way their skin moved wrong, rippling like water. The way their eyes weren't empty sockets, but full of darkness that moved, that swirled like smoke. They reached for us with those 2 long fingers. I pressed my back against the door and closed my eyes, waiting for the touch of those hands. Those things that looked like people but weren't. The touch never came. Instead, I heard a new voice. A woman's voice, clear and calm, cutting through the otherworldly singing. "Robert, Carl, open your eyes." I opened my eyes. The 7 figures had stopped. They stood motionless, arms still reaching toward us, but frozen mid-gesture. Between us and them stood a woman. She was young, maybe 30, dressed in a modern MBTA maintenance uniform like ours. Her face was kind, her expression sad. She looked at us with what might have been pity. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. "Not tonight, not Christmas Eve." "Who are you?" Carl asked. "My name was Jennifer Hayes. I worked maintenance, like you. 34 years ago, I was assigned to inspect this tunnel on Christmas Eve. I came in alone because my partner called in sick. I never left." I stared at her. She looked solid, real, nothing like the distorted figures. But she was standing between us and them, and they weren't moving. She had some kind of authority here. "What are they?" I managed to ask. "The first ones," Jennifer said. "The people who died when they built this tunnel. 1897. There was a collapse during construction. 7 workers were buried alive. The company covered it up, built over their bodies, never told anyone. They've been here ever since, waiting. Waiting for what? For witnesses, for someone to acknowledge them. Every year on Christmas Eve, they manifest, they sing, they remember, they try to make contact. But contact," she shook her head, "contact is dangerous. If they touch you, if you let them in, you become like them, stuck between, neither alive nor dead. Like me." Carl's voice was barely a whisper. "You're dead." "I've been dead for 34 years, but I'm still here, because I made contact, because I let them touch me. I've been warning people away ever since, but most nights, there's no one to warn. You're the first to come this far in a decade." "The door," I said. "Can you open it?" Jennifer looked at the door, then back at us. "I can, but there's a price." "What price?" "One of you has to stay. One of you has to take my place. Those are the rules. 7 of them, 1 of me. 7 to remember, 1 to guard. If you both leave, I'm bound here forever. If one of you stays, I can finally move on." "That's insane," Carl said. "We're not staying down here, neither of us." "Then you'll never leave. The door will stay locked, and eventually they'll touch you, both of you. And there will be 9 figures in this tunnel instead of 7. I looked at the frozen figures, at their reaching hands. Looked at Jennifer's sad smile, looked at Carl, who was shaking his head frantically. "There has to be another way," I said. "There isn't. I'm sorry. I've had 34 years to look for one. This is how it works. This is how it's always worked." Carl grabbed my shoulder. "Bobby, we wait for help. They said 20 minutes. We can hold out 20 minutes. "Can we?" Jennifer asked. "They're frozen now because I'm holding them. But I'm tired, Carl. So tired. I don't know if I can hold them for 20 minutes. And even if your colleagues come, even if they cut through the door, What do you think happens when these 7 touch living people? How far do you think the contamination spreads? The figures twitched, small movements, like they were straining against invisible bonds. I'm losing them, Jennifer said. You need to decide, now. I looked at Carl. He was 53 years old. He had a wife, 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren. He'd shown me pictures just last week, Christmas photos from previous years, everyone smiling around a tree. I was 41, divorced, no kids. My parents were dead. I had a sister in California I talked to maybe twice a year. The math wasn't hard. I'll stay, I said. Bobby, no. I'll stay, I repeated louder. Carl, you have a family. You have people who need you. I don't. Let me do this. I can't let you. You don't have a choice, and neither do I. I looked at Jennifer. How does this work? You take my place. You become the guardian. You keep them contained. And every Christmas Eve, you try to warn anyone who comes. Just like I did. And you get to move on? I get to rest, finally. I nodded. Okay, I'm ready. Jennifer stepped forward and placed her hand on my chest. Her touch was cold, but not unpleasant, like ice water on a hot day. I felt something flow from her into me, not physical, something else, knowledge, understanding, the weight of 34 years of lonely vigil. I'm sorry, she whispered, and thank you. She faded, not gradually, just there one moment and gone the next. The 7 figures unfroze but didn't advance. They turned back toward their alcove and resumed their slow walk, their song returning to the familiar melody of Silent Night. Behind Carl, the door's lock clicked open. He grabbed the handle and pulled. The door swung wide, revealing the active tunnel beyond, the work lights, the sound of a distant train. Safety, the world. Come on, he said, reaching for me. I shook my head. I can't. You know I can't. Bobby, please, go, before they come back. Before this doesn't work. Go, Carl. He stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down his face. Then he nodded once and stepped through the door. It swung shut behind him. I heard the lock click. And then I was alone. Alone with the 7 singers and the weight of their history. Alone in the dark, with only my headlamp, and the knowledge that I would stand this watch for years or decades until someone else came. Until someone else made the choice I'd made. I walked back to the alcove where the figures had resumed their positions, facing the wall, swaying and singing. I stood at the entrance and watched them. Igisa ignored me now. I was part of the scenery, part of the tunnel, part of their eternal Christmas Eve. Time passes differently here. I know that now. What feels like minutes might be hours. What feels like hours might be days. My headlamp never dies. My body never tires. I just exist in the space between, keeping watch. Every Christmas Eve, the 7 figures manifest and sing their hymns. And every Christmas Eve, I wait to see if anyone else will come, if anyone else will need warning. Most years, no one does. The tunnel stays sealed. The door stays locked. It's just me and them and the endless dark. But sometimes, rarely, I hear footsteps. I hear voices. And I step out of the shadows to deliver my warning, just like Jennifer did for me. You shouldn't have come here, not tonight, not Christmas Eve. And I watch their faces as they try to understand. Watch them make their choices. Watch them leave or stay. Carl retired 3 months after that night. He told the MBTA he had health issues, took his pension, moved to Florida with his wife. I know because I can still hear things from the world above. Vibrations through the concrete. Echoes of conversations in the active tunnel. Fragments of the life I used to have. He never told anyone what really happened. The official report said we completed the inspection, found nothing unusual, and exited normally. I was listed as having resigned shortly after for personal reasons. My final paycheck went to an account I'll never access. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. If I should have let Carl stay. If I should have let both of us take our chances with those 7 singers and their reaching hands. But then I remember his grandchildren's faces in those photographs. Remember the way he talked about them, the love in his voice. And I know I made the only choice I could live with. Even if living isn't quite the right word anymore. The singers are finishing their hymn now. They always end with Silent Night, no matter what other songs they perform throughout their manifestation. Their voices rise together in that final verse. Silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams from thy holy face, with the dawn of redeeming grace. Jesus Lord at thy birth, Jesus Lord at thy birth. The last note fades. They turn back to face the wall, and slowly, one by one, they fade into the concrete, returning to whatever place they go when they're not here. When Christmas Eve ends, and Christmas Day begins in the world above, I remain, I always remain, guardian of the forgotten, watcher of the sealed places, the man who made a choice in the dark and will live with it forever. If you work for the MBTA, if you're ever assigned to inspect the old sealed tunnels, especially near Park Street, especially on Christmas Eve, remember this story. Remember Robert Caldwell. And if you hear singing in the dark, if you see figures that shouldn't be there, turn around, walk away. Don't make the choice I made, because this tunnel is patient, and it's always looking for someone new to keep watch, always listening for the footsteps of the living, always ready to offer them a place in the darkness. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright.